rolling here. There we go. Let's get this part started. We are recording. We should be streaming in a second. There we go. Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Johnson, and I'm the founder and chairman of Aurora Worldwide Development Corporation. Joining me today is a new member of the Stochasm squad, Kathy Gray. Hi, Kathy.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Super, super excited to have you here. And our regular provocateur extraordinaire, Eric Garland. Hey, Eric.
Salut. Hello.
Raconteur.
Raconteur.
I can't ever say it right.
Flâneur. All the things you need me to be.
All right.
Part-time plumber, probably.
Plumeur. Sapeur, pompier, docteur, poète. C'est comme vous voulez, hein?
Well, we are a little late today, but that's okay. I'm still experimenting with this format for at least the month of January, and I think by February, when we sort of move into pre-launch, and Kathy, you asked about the logo a second ago. I'll give that quick explanation now, and then we can learn who you are and what it is you do. The logo that you see for Open Recon is actually something that came to me in late March of 2020 as I was noodling through how to reorganize the company. I had just talked to my kid brother, Derek, who's the CEO at Aurora, and explained to him that I think we need to have a mitosis event and to hive off the two sort of well-known parts of the company, Aurora GPS and First Light, into the dihydrogen side of the business, which was no accident, I think, in thinking of it as a dihydrogen molecule with its own electron cloud that could continue to persist and do its own thing out there. And meanwhile, I was going to strip off a few leaders from the business and some operators to mothball the learning and events business, Reconverge, and at the same time launch a new online events and communities business, I guess it's turned into, called Stochasm Studios. And so what you see in that logo actually is the sort of brownish portion of that. The tan portion is the dihydrogen side. The dioxide side is the sort of gray-black version. And so it's a dihydrogen dioxide molecule, otherwise known as hydrogen peroxide.
That's cool.
And I had just received my first iPad Pro that day. And it was this machine I'm actually talking to you on and this Apple Pencil. And I happened to sketch this out. And it turns out that was how to reorganize the company a year and a little more, I guess almost 2 years ago now. So that's where the logo comes from. That's the logo now for Open Recon, which is the confluence of the four businesses all working together to produce stakeholder reconnaissance communities, which is we're in pre-launch now of our first stakeholder reconnaissance community. We are moving into release on our second stakeholder reconnaissance community, Neighboring Life. We've got about 4 more in pre-release right now, which is where this kind of sits. You know, we're moving from pre-release to release on Close the Distance, which is one of the aspects of the Open Recon business, which I'm most excited about in 2022. So that's the background, Kathy, if you're wondering where the logo comes from.
Awesome. I like that.
The real logo of Aurora is this thing, which is sort of an alpha kind of image. And that was the brainchild of Jason Voyevich, actually our chief marketing officer, who helped me through the rebrand in 2017. And when we completed the rebrand, you can see some of that imagery sort of connected here with the Open Recon logo as well, which, by the way, was also a Jason innovation.
Okay.
Well, enough about me. Kathy, tell our audience who you are and what it is you do, and we'll freestyle this thing as long as we want to.
You know, I don't often have to do this, so it could ramble a little bit. I'll just cut me off. But I started in the CPG industry, consumer packaged goods, in 86, something like that. And started at the very bottom doing grocery store sets. And my dad was in the same business, so I kind of did it so he would stop asking me what I was going to do when I grew up, and just kind of progressed through the ranks and got to a point where I did the planograms for a while, which is how the plan sets all the products on the shelf. And you have to negotiate for that space and say I should be on the eye level shelf because XYZ. And usually there was somebody in the background that was putting all that data together for us. And now that's kind of what I do. So I work for smaller and medium-sized companies that don't have their own analytics department or their own analysts, and maybe don't know how to purchase some of the syndicated data that is really just scan data that tells you who sells what. And we've expanded to every other channel. We do mass and drug and value and grocery and club. What else? DECA. We do military channel. I'm trying to think of what else. I'm missing one of them. Oh, convenience was the other channel. So
you're kind of a
now
fractional chief merchandising officer almost.
Yeah, kind of. And it used to be more about merchandising, and now it's more about insights and what's going on with the business. We've really integrated a lot with what's going on online, because so many, if you aren't selling digitally or have something going on online, you're kind of left behind. So
right
that was a fast change that we had to make.
Well, I am fascinated by walking into the grocery store and seeing empty shelves lately. And so what are your thoughts on kind of supply chain-y related stuff? And feel free to tell me you can't tell me because that happens all the time in the world we live in, the world known as intelligence analysis, by the way.
I can tell you. Anybody that had sourced any part of their business overseas, which is a lot of consumer products, had trouble during COVID. And, for example, Long Beach, the ships just backed up. They just had to park out there because it kind of, once it started going again, everything bottlenecked. So for a while they couldn't get any product. And then for a while they couldn't get it in because it was just too much at one time. And then it kind of had a ripple effect. It affected everybody, regardless of whether they had to source any of their product or parts or components overseas, because the whole entire supply chain was disrupted. And additionally, they are having trouble keeping truck drivers right at the moment. So, there's a lot of factors that you wouldn't think that would contribute to it, that kind of seem to all have a little piece to do with it. So, and I think it's going to be a while before we get all the way back to where we were.
I was just triggered by your Long Beach comment. One of my close friends works in the shipping insurance business in Europe. And when that tanker, was it Evergrande? Or am I conflating that with the Chinese property developer?
I'm
something.
not sure.
Whatever that container was that got jammed sideways into the Suez Canal.
Oh, that thing in the Suez. Yeah.
So anyway, that happened, and I was on the treadmill when I saw the story hit, and I texted him immediately and said, kind of a big girl stuck there in the middle of the, main way that you get from the Mediterranean to the, Indian Ocean. And he's like, yeah, it's going to be a problem. And as I then sort of started watching the whole shipping container world a little more closely, and realized that, this whole thing with Port of Long Beach and LA is going to be a major, major problem here. Since then, of course, my understanding is that there are two zones around the port, and the inner zone is where they've been having the primary backlog. And what they had to do was tell all those ship captains basically to take it out into the outer zone so that at least it looks like we're addressing the backlog. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, history undergrad trying to interpret stuff I have no business trying to interpret, but it sounded a little fishy to me that they're addressing the backlog by optically making it look like there are fewer ships in that inner zone. Am I right? Or
I had not heard that aspect of it, but I do know that one of the things that contributed to it and I can't even tell you what the person who is responsible for this particular part of the chain is called, but the guys on the docks that operate the cranes that unload all the shipping containers, they were acting like a little mini mafia there. So they were only unloading guys that were polite to them and treated them well and maybe slipped them a little bit of whatever.
The longshoremen? Are you nesting? And what was the metaphor you just used for them? Like a mini what?
Oh, did I say that word? I'm so sorry. I must have I thought I just thought it. But the thing was, there were truck drivers there waiting to pick up that product, and they were sometimes stuck there for several days at a time because, the people that have to unload the containers, the guy sometimes it was just one guy, everything fell to him. And that was contributed to the backlog. It's like he just sort of would just drag his feet and just go, oh, did you want me to hurry up and get that for you so you can drive across the country with it? So there was a lot of bickering going on at that particular port, and I'm sure all of them,
as they say, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yes, it does. I say that often.
That thing's been going. Come on, guys. That thing's been going on since Prohibition. Since you had, since we made the historic mistake of outlawing the world's most popular product, beer. That all the ports had to be corrupt to some degree to get that product in and out, and it was even to such a point. Are you guys aware that the U.S. Navy and the Department of War had to make deals with the mafia because for like counterintelligence needs, because the only people who had sufficient control of the ports, and frankly who knew who should be there and who should not be there, like, hey, who's that guy over there? It was the same dudes who had been, shipping different stuff in and out for the previous couple decades. So one of the reasons the Navy has some historic corruption issues that may have some tendrils is they had to make deals with the longshoremen in the 40s. It's a weird world.
For some reason, I'm thinking of Guantanamo Bay, Cuba right now, and wondering, about the sort of interesting orthogonality between, a U.S. military presence in a place like that and the rum running that probably used some of those resources in order to profit from that artificial scarcity induced upon the American citizenry.
And some of it's just physics. You just can't have everything released at the same time and go through that same little narrow place. So, part of it's easy to understand, but these guys really exacerbated it from what I understand and still are. Wow. And they play favorites and they punish people and make them wait longer. And, there's just trucks just sitting there for days waiting for their load. So.
Right. All the human frailty.
Negotiate.
Right.
So did you know the Japanese used to use a very similar technique to get around being obvious about having adverse commercial trade policies like tariffs? And what I heard, because I did business over there, they called it Japanese inspection, like especially like food coming in. Like let's say you're going to import some cabbage or whatever, and they've got another preferred vendor or a local Japanese vendor that they want to protect. We don't have protectionist policies. Heavens to Betsy, no. But it just might be 4 days before we check that box and go, well, what are you sending us? This is some old food. What's going on, guys? Japanese inspection. So these shenanigans are not new, apparently.
Well, I am very interested in seeing how shortages are exacerbated by policy in the new year. That's one of my sort of things on my radar going forward. There's renewed interest in the age-old price control mechanism that never works and only serves to disincentivize producers from filling those scarcities more efficiently, while not addressing the cost structure downstream of those producers. So one of the things actually I'd love to share with you, and maybe I shared this already, but I bought my wife a distillery system and some inputs for that because I like to drink a little bit. And my wife, although she does not, she's a creative person and loves to sort of do creative things for other people. So I'm going to let her moonshine for me, I think is the short answer. And figure out how to do that, because productivity comes in many forms. And
Sure does.
productivity that I think we control the full value chain of. I think that's one of the trends, frankly, that we're going to see happening in the decade ahead is self-sufficiency, frankly, as people are forced to provide the things that they want themselves or to trade within their local sphere of friendlies. That's one of those things where you're going to see decentralization happen at a greater scale. So I'm curious,
Absolutely.
Kathy, your take on that.
Well, it made me think of, first of all, I just sent you an article on that very thing about the longshoremen that are kind of adding to the backlog that was interesting. But also it made me think of, there's a few local groups called it's called Buy Nothing. And then you can start your local chapter of that on, I think, Facebook or Instagram or wherever you do. And it is to trade things that you have that you don't need anymore. And you don't sell them, you just trade them.
Right.
So that's another way to be self-sufficient. And then I was talking to somebody just this morning about a girl that I had seen on, I can't even remember where, on the internet, somewhere on the interwebs. And she had started with a hairpin, I think, and traded that for something better. And then traded that for something better and traded all the way up to where she got a van. And then after that, she got a motorhome. And ultimately, she ended up with a house. So she had traded that many times with people who thought that whatever they had, it might be worth more, but it's not worth anything to me because I don't need it. So she made it all the way up to a house and then she gave it away and started over.
What a story. Wow.
I know. It's really cool. So there's a lot of...
She went back and
yeah, she went back. She gave away the house and then started over again because she wanted to be able to do things for other people. I think it's totally cool.
She went back and proved the baseline lessons of microeconomics, of trade, of the agora, of the souk, of the market. I don't know what they had in Sumeria for that, but that's like real basic. Like, I'll trade you this for that. Guns and butter. I mean, that's cool. Original research.
I've known a few very successful entrepreneurs over the years at various things, and one thing they've all had in common is when they hit their 50s, there's this weird, desire, and for some reason they share it with me for some bizarre reason. There's this weird desire to start over, and I don't know if it's the midlife crisis or what it is, but the common thread that I've heard, and it's always men, it seems. I've never had this happen actually with a woman entrepreneur, but there's this weird boy, I'd like to sell it, give it all away, let my kids take over, whatever it is, dispose of their success and the trappings of that success, start over, and then just to see how long it would take them to get it back again. And I'm like, when I first heard that, I was in my early 20s and it was one of my first jobs. And I'm like, you'd never be able to do that. And the particular gentleman who shared that with me was a very successful salesman, frankly. He'd sell anything. And he had a chain of men's clothing stores in Germany and had married a German girl, and he was stationed there in the army and all that sort of stuff. And eventually he was in the medical products business And that's where I met him. And he said, we got to be friends. And I think he kind of took me under his wing a little bit, but that was the first time I heard it. And then I heard it like 10 more times over the last 25 years. And it's like, I don't have that, because I know now.
Yeah.
And this is a lesson that is only taught by experience. I know now how to tap into my best self, as you both do, in order to produce my most valuable output. But there's a price, man. And that price is it's a 1-to-1 recovery time. I gotta take time off. I Sabbath my butt off over the weekends, because I just can't do it. I can't keep it up over the weekends. I gotta lay on the couch. And it's not me getting older. It's me knowing how to dig deep and get that 90th percentile of performance,
Right.
But then I got to pay it back.
Yeah, well, not everybody has that kind of, love for their fellow man, I don't think. They like to keep all of that stuff, but that's good that you do that.
So, Eric, that reminds me of is on the performance side is the tennis champion Pete Sampras. Oh, somebody once described him as a champion sleeper. That he got a regular 11 hours of sleep. His thing was wherever he was, he made sure he had whether he's at home or hotel or on location where he's with a tennis coach or whatever, that he had a completely dark room. It was clean sheets. The air conditioning was set down to 62, and he was in the sack at 7 p.m. because he was going to be up and pedal to the metal the next day. But that was all predicated by more sleep than the average person and under specific controls. And he took his downtime as important as his uptime.
Yeah. Well, and athletes will tell you, as a casual one from time to time myself, it's not the workout, it's the recovery that really is what expands your capacity for performance. And that's something I learned finally in college. I rode on the crew team here at Madison for a little bit. And that's actually where I discovered that notion that you have an envelope of performance that is mostly untested. You haven't pushed that envelope very hard. But when you do, you can then expand that envelope to be higher performance, and it's not always faster. It's sometimes it's just stronger as opposed to faster. But the dimensions of performance that we think of as being part of our capacity, unless we explore them, we don't even know they're there. They disappear on us, and we just sort of forget about them. And I don't know. That's what maybe my only New Year's resolution this year is to keep pushing my own limits and find the limit. And when you find the limit, you usually break down. Unfortunately.
I think most of mine have been found by short deadlines. Just there's no way I'm going to be able to do all of this, and then you find a way. So
right,
increases your efficiencies, and you drop by the wayside those things that don't contribute to that end goal. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things that factor into that.
Trimming and prioritization, that's a really underrated skill. The ability to ignore the things that won't be difference makers.
Right. I work with somebody right this minute who is very, very good at that, and has taught me quite a bit in that specific area. Beautiful. That whole perfectionism hinders forward progress. I don't know how it's said, but if you try to do everything perfect, you don't get as much done. So that's kind of the underlying idea.
My chief analytics officer is a man named Craig Fleischer, and Professor Fleischer, as he is sort of colloquially known, Dean, maybe. He is probably, I think he is still the most cited scholar in the world on intelligence.
Number one
business.
He's the GOAT. He's
got Michael Porter beat actually by a few, due to the fact that he's written many, many more books than Michael Porter has, in spite of the fact that he is I think he would admit to being much less financially successful than Porter was. But Craig has got this sort of great perspective on a lot of these issues. And I've learned a lot from Craig in the last, I guess he's been here in Aurora about 11, 12 years. It's been more than a decade. But Craig's got this amazing sort of perspective on this, and he compartmentalizes into something he calls the 4 sets. And so it starts with mindsets, that there are mindsets that are programmable within a group. It extends to skill sets, and those skill sets are things that are also adaptable, learnable, teachable, maybe is the better way of saying that. You then have data sets, which are a different type of programming that happens. And then what's the last one? Why am I blanking on it? Tool sets. And so that original image, that 4-part image that makes up the Open Recon logo, I've discovered that there's actually business applications for that concept of the 4 sets: mindsets, skill sets, data sets, and tool sets, and how they sort of fit together in organizations to help you make that a little more manageable. And figure out where to put your emphasis. So I've used that now for a couple of years since he sort of thought of it.
How does that, is that anything at all like Six Sigma? I never did anything with that. And I think you did, Eric, didn't you? And my sister-in-law does that, process change management.
A Six Sigma black belt.
Yeah, I don't know what that all entails. Because I never did go through the program myself. But
process quality, and getting it down to 6 sigmas of derivation from the mean. So it's like you're doing everything perfectly 99.99999% of the time, and you get green belts and black belts like it's taekwondo. I don't know. We don't got that.
I could probably benefit from that, I think.
Well, I think
getting lost in the weeds so much.
Six Sigma has, I think, come under a little bit of criticism in the last few years, because there's this great video that I encourage everybody to Google and find, because I'm not going to share it here. It's very, very copyrighted. And so I will not be even, offering my visual commentary on it. But it's an image of a bunch of kids passing the basketball back and forth. And it's 2 basketballs, actually. And I think there's 3 or 4 college students, and they're hanging out outside an elevator. And the task at hand is to count how many times the yellow shirted people pass the basketball. And you see it. And as you're counting, in the middle of this vignette, somebody in a gorilla suit walks through and beats their chest and then walks off. And you do not see it. No one sees it. Nobody ever sees it the first time. Sorry for.
Yeah, I think I've seen something like that.
Alert. But nobody ever sees it because you're so busy counting the yellow passes that you just don't see this thing crop up. And it's a perfect example of what happens, in the real world, that you are so busy focused on the minutia of your frame of reference, on the macro environment that you're trying to study, that this giant black swan rolls in and you barely even knew what hit you, by the time you realized that something happened. But that's kind of how Six Sigma is in a lot of ways, I think, today for organizations. Is they're so focused on micromanaging to the 6th decimal point of error reduction that they just don't see the big changes.
Right.
We are doing, with a fine Swiss degree of accuracy, precision, something that is strategically suicidal.
Yeah. Yep.
It's like balanced scorecard. If that's not if that's not challenged by strategic intelligence, like, all right, okay, you're balancing your scorecard out for your performance metrics. Are you going to have a company in 4 years? Because being perfect right now is not as important as getting on with the world's changes. Though that's been a tough sell the last 20 years. Of you should look up from your desk.
Well, and being able to see down the road is not a real popular ability sometimes, even though they think they would want to be able to do that. Or they think they can do that. Then you go, I don't really see it ending up that way. It's just like when you guys were talking yesterday about how anybody in intelligence has to, be comfortable with being unpopular sometimes, or having people annoyed with you for telling them what you see.
Well, and Kathy, in consumer packaged goods, you have a great degree of very specific expertise there. Haven't you been kind of on the bleeding edge of warning some people here and there about maybe the fact that a lot of these retailers for consumer packaged goods are tied up also distributing opioids? That might get messy
Oh my
here.
gosh. That is actually correct. Um, there's been a lot of consolidation across industries that all used to be kind of, local mom and pops. And the bigger that they get, and the more of a monopoly that they get, and the more power that they get, and depending on, who buys who. I mean, if you want to look at an interesting case, check out Cabela's versus Bass Pro Shops and what's going on there, and who bought who, and who's using whose capital to. I mean, they basically run one of the companies into the ground and kind of just destroy it. And then they don't have any competition either, and they've used their capital. So, I mean, there's a lot of that's happening, and then there's a lot of people that have infiltrated a lot of these businesses for their own purposes. And I can't say who that is, but there's a chain right now that I do quite a bit of work for that has a CEO who's mentioned in the Panama Papers. And you could tell the second that he came in, things kind of started to turn a little bit. They became less concerned about day-to-day business, kind of like, oh, we got this. And it was really a strange mind shift that kind of permeated the entire company. And you were like, that's really weird. Why would they not want to make more money? Why would they not want to hear, where they're kind of, cutting corners or maybe not doing the best that they could? And they didn't seem to be terribly concerned about it. And now that all of that has been cracked down on, now they're panicked and they know that they have to figure out how to run their own business again.
Wow.
So it's been interesting to watch that transition. And I think it's, I know that one because I had worked so intimately with them, but I think it's been a lot of industries that have had the same thing happen. There's so many industries in the United States that are foreign controlled or majority owned by foreign entities. So there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong with that. And, all they've done is try to deregulate most of that, so they don't have to account for any of it. So there was a pretty good mix there that was rife with criminality and opportunism. And I mean, it's still there.
I mean, aggregating and deregulating a organization that doles out opioids is it's got some sharp corners on it potentially.
Right. Because then you can play both sides of that particular thing too. You could be the good guy and the bad guy. And then what about Narcan? Would you want to, make that more or less available strategically?
Strategically, it's been less available. Why?
Yeah.
That's regulation. But it's funny when you talk about like the foreign ownership thing. I live in St. Louis here, and there's a chain that's gone national and international, apparently. Panera, which used to be known as the St. Louis Bread Company. So even
really?
people around here are, they still refer to it as Breadco. It says Panera. It's almost like if you look at I-4 here, anybody from here says 40. That's farty. Because it's Highway 40 and it's farty and 45. So anybody looks at I-64, they say 40. Anybody looks at Panera, they say Breadco, St. Louis Bread Company. It's being run out of Luxembourg right now. I'm like, okay. I mean, they get some pretty good ass bread over in France and Europe and whatnot. Like, Italian bread's pretty good. Even German's got bakers, right? So I don't know. There's some of these expansions of these consumer chains that I get curious about, like Carl's Jr. and Hardee's, which was being run by Andy Putzter, who was the guy that Trump wanted to put in as Department of Labor. It didn't really go, but he started expanding that company out international, and like like out of the gate, I think it was Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Armenia. I'm like, okay, there are a whole lot of Muslims there for bacon cheeseburgers. Kind of strange, Starbucks' expansion was a different story, though. I found out when Starbucks came into Paris, I thought, this is insane. These people are going to get mangled. This is the home, this is the home of the cafe, right? But there's so much caffeine in a venti coffee that, the French were like, I can carry around 800 milligrams of caffeine in one spot. And so they're like, the coffee sucks, it's good enough, and I am awake for the next 9 hours. And so that worked. But important bread there and stuff, it's like an important rice to China,
So I was just reading sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
Eric and I had talked in the past about who actually owns all of the different grocery chains and how they kind of merged into just a few of those. I mean, there's Belgian owned and German owned, and it's really interesting that there are so many foreign owned suppliers of food in this country.
So concentration of capital is one of the trends of the last decade that I think is going to reverse itself, because the capital itself is going to be diluted by the denominator of the fiat currency and under which it is counted. And so as we see that sort of happen, the Federal Reserve is otherwise known as the creature from Jekyll Island. If you've never read that book, it's a fascinating history of the Federal Reserve and how in 1911, basically all the banking oligopoly got together and said, we need to control the money supply. And how would we do that? Well, we're going to get the White House and Congress to give us the power to create the Federal Reserve. And in 1913, they did. And since then, I think the dollar's lost about 97% of its buying power in the 100 years or so hence. Now, that said, the money supply is the principal mechanism through which price inflation takes place. And of course, as a grocery analyst and observer and provocateur yourself, Kathy, obviously we've had a tremendous amount of price appreciation, escalation across certain categories of the grocery world. As that continues to happen, there's a lot of talk, again, about price controls. And from a policy standpoint, putting a lid on prices does not solve the problem. It merely creates black markets. And by the way, that was the problem with the Soviet Union and every, command economy, is that when there's a centralized plan for how the economy is going to work, and we were invoking Adam Smith, and I used Bastiat was the French economist that we introduced in the sort of the petition of the candle makers was the specific story. Whenever you command control the economy, price discovery becomes impossible. You no longer have supply and demand equilibria that gives signals to the market about where scarcities and abundances are occurring. So I guess I just throw that out there as a provocative foil for us to think about, because I think this whole centralization and concentration of capital is about to reverse itself as the Fed supposedly will be tapering its asset purchases, particularly the junk bond part and the portion of the loan portfolio that the banking system would like them to financialize. So, thoughts?
I was thinking the other day, I was driving along and I was noticing the gas price. And there aren't too many other prices of things that we pay that close attention to. And gas prices affect our supply chain and our pricing of any item that you purchase. So that, to your point, anything that's centralized like that, is going to be dependent on a lot of other factors, I think. So I just was thinking that the other day when I went by and went, oh my gosh, we're up over 250 now. So, or whatever it is.
I'm wondering, when you talk about all that central bank stuff, I'm wondering, and you said something about junk bonds. I'm wondering about how that provision in the National Defense Authorization Act a year ago, making, demanding that FinCEN start to catalog the ultimate beneficial owners of all these LLCs. And sure, we've heard a lot about the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers, and Malta and Cyprus, and very well we should. But I think when people start making statements, and I had heard these long before they became in vogue. It's like the number one money laundering offshore banking hotspot in the world is onshore. It's the United States, and it's Wyoming, Nevada, South Dakota, Delaware. Those are the big ones. And they have, they each have their special reasons for, why they're popular. I believe the formation of trusts, and the disclosure of that information out of South Dakota is, they're tighter, they might as well be the Cayman Islands for trusts, and trusts sometimes own corporations, which then are owned by individuals who are then owned by, or whatever. I mean, you get these huge, incredibly complex structures, and it's it's onshore in the United States. And when you look at affairs like what's going on in Ohio and Louisville and St. Louis to a degree, where you have foreign capital, like from that Ukrainian oligarch, that guy's name, Kolomoisky, where like the dude was buying up, huge chunks of Cleveland. And it turns out it's the money laundered from Privatbank, where they, cut a gaping hole in that country's economy. And somehow they got it in here through Miami and through Delaware. And so they're buying up all these buildings. And, surely that's not the only thing they invested in, right? So when we start getting the ultimate beneficial owners of those LLC structures in the United States, and we're still the world's economic engine, so I'm not trying to be chauvinistic about just thinking here. Canadian economy is important, Mexican economy, etc. But we're the engine, and we got a big problem with financialization and money laundering and the rule of law. And we've taken our first steps in the last year toward ending it, and toward talking about it for the first time. And I just wonder what's going to happen to these asset prices when that's not possible, or it's at least a lot less possible, and the risk of being discovered for doing something that's not on the up and up finally goes to the level where what I'm looking for risk to be priced into things and not externalized to the common person after the fact. After the engineers who construct these insane structures, after they've taken all their money, then you privatize the profits and socialize the destruction. And I want their capital to be at risk, and for that risk to be priced in by how much it costs them to borrow to do stuff. And I don't mean borrowing for 0.9% and then stuffing a retail joint like Guitar Center full of pick notes at 13%. That ain't risk. That's just building something deliberately crappy so that you can make money off it. I'm talking about if you stand a chance at loss, and you will not, and that loss will not be socialized, and for your risk to be priced in. And then, hey, some of that's selfish because we do risk analysis, and there should, I don't know. I think if when you've got an ever expanding and ever concentrating industry, is no wonder we sometimes have trouble getting people to listen to us about, hey, you're going to get mangled if you do that. If they're like, yeah, but I won't. I'm going to get a $5 million payout if I get fired for this. At
Golden
the very top.
parachute, you know.
So Monica Nixon, hello Monica, you're missed here on this conversation.
Yes.
Texted around the other day. Monica said, and I'll paraphrase because I'll do the best job I can of conveying her idea here. The saying goes about the powerful: if your hands are clean, it means your whorehouse does manicures, I think is the way she put it, or words to that effect. And I thought, boy, that's just really perfect, because it does sort of suggest that all these SOBs in charge, all of them have some degree of collusion. And we started this off actually talking about longshoremen who are suddenly in positions of power, and that absolute power corrupts absolutely. Mm-hmm. That's what I think happens to the human condition when invested with, orders of magnitude greater influence over the outcomes of many.
Sure.
I think it's the nature of how humans fall. And so as we see that, the dilution, I guess, is what deconcentration means. The dilution of that power through the dilution of their capital. I'll speak for myself and my capital. I'm investing my capital mostly in stuff that I can do here. And so it would not be an inaccurate statement to look at my web history and notice that I've been researching biofuels, and particularly biodiesel. What particular agriculture can I grow out here that would allow me to fuel my tractor and whatever other vehicles I need from my own production and my own productive capacity? What would that look like? What does a diesel-powered, specifically biodiesel-powered power plant look like when it's attached to a house like mine? So that, boy, if there were an EMP from China in the atmosphere 10,000 miles above America, or above St. Louis probably, or Kansas City, dead center on the country, and suddenly the lights are out in the middle of January, which, by the way, I think the forecast was about 90% of the American population would not survive past about 6 months if such an event did take place. And then suddenly, boy, there's no radiation because they hit it in the atmosphere. Could they just walk in and take the place? So anyway, I'm getting into some conspiracy theory stuff. And by the way, the words conspiracy theory were invented by the Central Intelligence Agency after the Kennedy assassination. I saw an interesting cultural anachronism the other day. I watched the Downton Abbey movie with my wife, finally, like 3 years after it came out. And one of the characters in there, one of the main characters, used the term conspiracy theory in the movie, set in the 1920s, of course. And I said, Tina, that never happened. Well, obviously it never happened. It's a fictional movie. But anyway, the notion that decentralization is incentivizing capital to invest at the local level rather than investing at some transnational level, as has traditionally been the case. That maybe is where we'll kind of wrap things for today about. What are your thoughts?
Me? Are you asking me?
Yeah. Kathy, you have the floor.
I don't know. It's like it could go so many different directions. I mean, you also could talk about the solar farms that they have everywhere. I mean, if we drive to Myrtle Beach, there's entire fields that used to be, down here, mostly it was cotton or soybeans. And now it's just these huge, vast acres and acres of solar panels. So, I mean, I think being self-sufficient is going to become a lot more important as we go forward, just with the uncertainty that's built into everything that's going on. So I'm not really sure what the next thing is. You guys are the futurists. So what do you think, Eric?
I want to be careful about the self-sustainability movement thing, because the forecasts for that are there's a rise and fall of about every 20 years about self-sufficiency. And it's not that it's not that we don't see the resurgence of those trends and that people find it very satisfying and humane. It's just there are economies to scale to be made with classic macroeconomics. You make guns, I'll make butter. That has economies of scale that remain attractive. I wonder if what'll happen if we have an exposure of both the corruption of large institutions that are domestic to us, or they look domestic and they're jam full of foreign interest, and or our relationship with various foreign partners, which may get testy. I want to bring up one that nobody mentioned. Everyone expects me to bring up Russia and China, but some of the actions of the United Kingdom may not be all that friendly. And they're supposedly a very close ally, but somewhere between their financial policies and that Prince Andrew guy, there's some, we may be reevaluating a lot of relationships or resetting expectations and whatnot. So I wonder if that won't bring more of a close to home thing. I will say that I've looked at some of the economic development plans. There's a lot of manufacturing being repatriated here for necessity, and France is doing a ton where they're putting out their defense. They're announcing new toys that they're going to be playing with, and on each part of the tank or the plane or the ship or whatever, they have a little company and it's French address and points it here. It's like, this comes from Bordeaux, this comes from Caen, this comes boom, 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 and it's you can see where. Where they're getting at. And I think what the COVID thing did, when we realized how much medical personal protective equipment was coming from not our country, whoever you are, not us, that was seen as a systemic risk. So we'll be re-centralized. We'll be bringing a lot more stuff local for national security reasons. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, as we kind of wrap up here for today, Kathy, welcome to the Stochasm Squad. We value your repeated appearances here going forward. I hope you can join us as often as you're able.
Thanks.
I'm going to go ahead and say we should all join the Discord. I have a Discord set up for Open Recon, and I'll send you guys a link to join that. If you're not a Discord user, don't worry. I wasn't either a few months ago. In fact, I had an intern over the summer. My summer internship is known as Operation White Aperture here at Aurora, because the whole idea is to speculate on things that we think will be valuable that currently are not. They're nonsensical. They're even sort of amusing to think of working on. So over the summer, I had a young man who was my intern, and he taught me how to build crypto token systems on distributed ledgers. And so we launched something called Kineticoin at the time. And by the end of the summer, those Kineticoin were of various different denominations, I guess, for lack of a better word. But one of the things you're going to see us do is, as we sort of decentralize to distributed ledger systems, you're going to begin to see a lot of the rewards and incentive structures come alongside that. And so, sneak preview, Kineticoin is really the actionable token that I hope will be used to denominate selfish, collective, and selfless actions within the Open Recon platform and across the stakeholder reconnaissance communities that we're building. And so the things that you do by joining here, for example, as a provocateur, Kathy or Eric or Monica, wherever you are, will earn you Kineticoin simply by sharing your insights. And the consequences of earning that Kineticoin then later have fungible conversion dynamics at decentralization. So we're planning for decentralization events taking place in the future using DAO, or decentralized autonomous organization. So all of the SRCs that we're building will eventually have a DAO event where they decentralize, and the owner of the SRC collectivizes that equity across the participants who are early adopters. Well, or late adopters for that matter. It's just that the late adopters get less. And so this incentive structure is my attempt to create a pico economy at the level of each SRC and a nano economy at the platform level of Open Recon. So that's what you've got to look forward to in 2022. We're going to see what happens with all of this. And just for the record, I am making no attempt to avert, avoid, or dodge my tax obligations as a citizen of the United States of America and, special purpose taxpayer across a number of different legal entities that I hope the IRS will look at this and say at my next audit, well done, good and faithful servant of the government. So same goes for you guys, I assume, as well.
Yes.
So with that, I'm going to call it a day on this one, and we'll see you back here tomorrow, whoever shows up, and we'll coordinate on the Discord. I'll send out links for that here, but thanks for closing the distance with us today, Kathy. It's great to have you on board, and Eric, always
Thanks
a pleasure.
for having me. All right. Have a great day, you guys.
All right.